Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur podcast. I know we missed the previous episode. We normally do it every other week, but I think that the holiday unfortunately got in the way there, and we weren't able to get one here. But we're back now, ready to get after it with another pod. And this week I have a very special guest here. We've got Will from the Exploding Helicopter blog podcast. So yeah, Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Matt. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
Yes, likewise. I've been a fan of your site for a long time, and I really love sort of your treatment of that trope of the exploding helicopter. How did you get into that? How did you get into to tracking this element in the action film for so long?
Well, it all happened really by accident. So I was watching, this is many years ago, because I've been running Exploding Helicopter for over 10 years now. We celebrated our 10th anniversary about 6 months ago. And so many years ago, I was watching a DVD RoboCop knockoff, which is, I imagine, right in your wheelhouse, Matt, called Cyborg Cop.
Yes,
and I can't remember now, I'm afraid, passage of time, whether it was Cyborg Cop 1 or Cyborg Cop 2, but I was watching it with a friend of mine, and a helicopter comes into shot during part of that movie, and they said, "Oh, I bet that helicopter is about to explode." And I kind of knew exactly what they meant, because, having watched so many films, it's like, well, helicopters do explode an awful lot of the time. And sure enough, this helicopter blew up in Cyborg Cop. And that was really the seed that was planted in my mind. And a few years later, I was looking around, having to think about a sort of a project to do. And yeah, exploding helicopters, it just sort of sat at the back of my mind. I thought, yeah, you know what? I am going to spend a bit of time trying to document and prove to the world that helicopters do explode in films a bizarre amount of the time, and often in some very strange ways.
Yes. One thing I have to say is I always joked that kind of like the biggest trope in movie blogging is movie bloggers using the term trope, but I feel like the way your treatment is of the exploding helicopter, you've kind of made it safe for us to use that term again, because I don't think it's over. It's not, it would be that the best way. Like, you're not overly reductive when it comes to the exploding helicopter. There is I don't know if love is the right term to use for it, but you definitely treat it in a way where you respect the movie making, or you kind of have fun with it. And I think for action film fans, that's part of it. I think we always have fun with our action movies, but we don't like it if somebody's just like making fun of our action movies in a way that's like, your movies are dumb. It's almost like we're all having fun with this. We're all having a good time with this, which I really appreciate. I think your approach to it is just fantastic. Though sort of the commentary, the jokes. I love your Twitter page in particular, where you find some really great ones and you can play GIFs and things like that. I think that's the best. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I absolutely love the way you approach it.
Oh, thank you. I mean, and I do, yeah. I try to retain a sense of humor about this because, I mean, fundamentally, this is a rather silly thing to dedicate 10 years of podcasting and blog writing to. And I love the action genre, and so there are very many silly films in that particular genre, but they're just really trying to entertain us. So I don't ever hold the silliness of a film against the filmmakers or against the film itself. So we're all just trying to have fun when we sit down to watch an ideally 90-minute long movie.
Yes, exactly. We wanted to be 90. I don't want it too much. Excuse me, sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's like there's something about the action genre that for people that are outside of fans of it, it's almost like for us as fans of the genre, we love making fun of it to each other. We love making jokes about it. But when somebody from the outside who likes other, like, who's more like, I don't know, they're more, film connoisseurs. I don't know what the best way to describe them is, but when they make fun of our action movies, it's like, okay, no, we don't, we get defensive about it, and so I think that's what I appreciate is that the way you do it is definitely as a fan of action movies, and I think for us action fans, I think when the way you treat it, it's a way that's like, yes, he likes them, the same way as we do. I think that's one of the problems with a lot of ways action movie tropes are dealt with. They're dealt with by people who don't just love action movies. I think that's the problem, is that they, you get some kind of clickbaity thing. Oh, top 10 exploding helicopters in movies all time, and they're all these big budget ones, and it's just somebody, trying to get hits on their movie magazine website or something like that. And this is definitely not that. This is definitely, like you said, almost like a labor of love in your case.
Oh yeah, it's a definite labour of love because sadly I'm not getting paid for any of this. But I do. I think you make a really good point there. And if you watch action films, you're going to see the same types of plot over and over again. You're going to see the same types of archetypes over and over again. And so there's no point just beefing about the fact that it's that plot device coming up again. And really what I think action fans appreciate is they know they're getting the same ingredients again and again, but the joy of action films is seeing how filmmakers make them fresh by changing them up a little bit, by kind of giving you a little twist or a little quirk. So you're seeing that familiar ingredient that you know and like, but you're seeing it hopefully in the good films in a way that you haven't quite seen before. And I think that's what I think sometimes some film fans get a bit hung up on the sort of the familiar archetypes, the familiar tropes, and they're less appreciating, but you haven't seen it quite done that way before. So why not just, take the starch out of your collar and just sit back and enjoy this film a little bit more?
Yeah, I think you make a really great point there, because it is one of those things. I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I almost feel like that when you see helicopters on, I don't know, is that the tarmac or the helipad or something in an action movie, they have almost like a bovine quality of like like a documentary on cattle's going to slaughter or something like that. You're just like, that this helicopter is going to be blown up at some point, and it's sort of the windscreen's almost like their sad eyes just kind of sitting there in the field, and so it's going to happen. But you're right, it's almost like, how are they going to do it? What way is this going to happen? And I think for us action fans, it's like we have fun with it, knowing that it's going to happen, and it's like you said, seeing some of the different ways. So that's something I was going to notice there. Why do you think, though, out of all the tropes, you think of things like the damsel in distress, the car chase, the sidekick maybe getting killed, or those kinds of things. What is it about the exploding helicopter that makes it so prevalent in these movies?
Yeah, that's a question that I've thought about before, and I think that it is the fact that helicopters are slightly out of the ordinary, but they're not completely out of the ordinary. So they can be involved in all different types of scenarios. So they could be in a big city, or it could be out in the wilderness, out in some sort of mountain or desert type setting, and they're so they're a little bit out of the ordinary. So it's a little bit cooler to blow up a helicopter than it is to I know, blow up another car or blow up some other type of vehicle or building. So, and usually in these types of films, you've got the forces of evil pitted against our lone hero. So, giving them superior numbers, giving them superior firepower and superior weaponry, i.e. like some helicopters, like some aerial presence. I think that kind of feeds into the fact that why they often crop up in these films and why they are a potential target for an explosion.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, because it's like, we always think naturally when it comes to battle or warfare that having the high ground is the advantage. And so maybe our underdog hero being able to shoot something that's got the advantage on him. Of course, though we've seen plenty where the helicopter's still on the tarmac and gets blown up as well. But I think it's still that idea that it's like, yeah, it's something, or like you said, it's something that can be used anywhere. Like I think it's hard to have an airplane in a city area,
exactly.
Especially after 9/11. Now you really don't want to have an airplane in a city area. But I think that's something where helicopter, like you said, it's natural to be in a city area, but like you said, it's going to be in the desert. It could be anywhere, and it's a kind of an easy thing to explode. But like you said, probably too, we've seen enough cars explode, and it's easier to blow up a car because it's stationary and you can get a junker anywhere for that. But a helicopter, like I said, it's a little more exotic. You've got to find a new way to do that.
For sure.
Now, what are some of your favorites that you've seen over time as you've been documenting these?
Well, I really enjoy Rambo 3 as a film, but also I think from the point of view of exploding helicopters. That film's got four chopper fireballs in, and they all blow up in a really exciting wide array of different methods. So Stallone uses an explosive tipped arrow to blow up one helicopter within that film. He also then destroys another with some really gratuitous machine gun firing. So he's just sort of behind this big machine gun, just firing round after round at this oncoming helicopter with the shell casings spinning out. It's just fantastically over the top piece of machine gunning. And then the big finale of the film is the tank versus helicopter death charge at the end of that particular film, and that's another fantastic exploding helicopter. So I think in terms of number, in terms of variety, I think Rambo 3 is an absolutely fantastic film that if you're looking for an introduction into the world of exploding helicopters, I think Rambo 3 is definitely a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree completely. I love, for me, especially the explosive tipped arrow one. I thought that for an exploding helicopter, for me, I think that's definitely one of my favorites. And for people out there who haven't listened to your podcast, my favorite episode of your podcast is the one that you did with your friend Dara on Rambo 3. That was just a fantastic episode. I think it really got to the heart of, all the some of the action terms, but just like Rambo 3 is one that just seems like it has everything. But yeah, I think that's up there for me with the Stone the Stone Cold one where the motorcycle runs into the helicopter and blows it up.
That is a fantastic scene.
Yeah, I think those two for me, the Rambo explosive tipped one and that one with the motor. I mean, I kind of, that's one of my little niches within the exploding helicopter. I love when another vehicle is shot at a helicopter to make it blow up. So I like the Die Hard movie where he used the car off a ramp and hit it. I always kind of think that's always interesting to use a station, a terrestrial vehicle and shooting it up at the helicopter to blow it up. It's almost like a combination of the car flip with the helicopter explosion.
Yeah, you must love The Expendables 2 for that matter, where Stallone fires a motorbike at an airborne helicopter in order to blow it up.
Yeah, that's that's like kind of something for me, a part of the genre that I always enjoy is that use of it. But I think an explosive tipped arrow too is just like the idea of an explosive tipped arrow I think is fantastic, and then using it to blow. I mean, of course, once you have an explosive tipped arrow in an action film, that's the natural next step is you've got to blow up a helicopter with it, I think.
I mean, I think also for me, what I learned as I started getting into this as a topic and as a subject was that not only do helicopters blow up an awful lot of times, not just the quantity, but also they do blow up in some very strange ways. So there are films. There's a sort of 80s movie out there called Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, and the helicopter in that film gets blown up by psychically controlled flamingos. So the hero Sheena of that film, she uses her ability to connect with animals to get this flock of flamingos to attack a helicopter, and that's not something I ever thought I would see in a film.
That's amazing. Yeah, the one thing I've noticed, I think is that the only time you've ever seen other birds used to kill a helicopter. I mean, flamingos, of course, it's even another level, but other animals used to kill a helicopter or blow up a helicopter?
So in Jurassic World,
Right.
birds are responsible for the helicopter blowing up there. So they crash into the helicopter, causing damage, which causes it to blow up. I mean, the helicopter. There is a scene where an elephant attacks a helicopter earlier in the film, Sheena. Sadly, the helicopter doesn't blow up there. I mean, that would just be incredible. Yeah, but I think animals. There's a film called an Indian film called A Tank or R Tank, and in that film a shark leaps out of the water and smashes into a helicopter, causing it to blow up. So there are quite a lot of animal related exploding helicopters, but I think you're right. I think it's an area that is still rich for a bit further exploration by filmmakers.
Yeah, it's funny because I noticed like on your Twitter page you've posted a couple situations where people took motorcycles, jumped through the helicopter, and dropped off grenades or things like that within the helicopter on their way by, and then which I think I am I right that I've seen that twice? Like was there there's the Resident Evil movie, right, that did it, and then. Or was it a Resident Evil movie that did it with?
It was Ultraviolet.
Ultraviolet. Okay.
Still Mila Jovovich, but not that franchise.
Right. And then wasn't there a Godfrey Ho movie or something like that did it too, or something like that?
Yeah, there's a Thai or Filipino set action movie from 1986 called Final Score, and it's got Chris Mitchum, son of Robert Mitchum, in it, and he leaps through an airborne helicopter on his motorcycle, drops off a grenade inside the cabin, and obviously exits the other side of the helicopter. He lands safely, helicopter blows up. So it's been done. Yeah, motorcycling through a helicopter has been done a few times.
Yeah, I think there must be this idea that maybe again it goes to this idea of like the helicopter having the high ground, and a terrestrial vehicle somehow is at a disadvantage to the helicopter, and somehow turning the tables, I guess, in a way that we don't expect our hero to do it. But it is absolutely amazing. I think for anybody who's not following you on Twitter, I mean, the blog is especially great, but those quick hitters where you're just kind of scrolling through and you see there's Mila Jovovich jumping through a helicopter. Did she drop off grenades, or does she like machine? I can't remember in her case if it was.
She machine guns the pilots, so that causes it to ultimately blow up.
Yeah, that's another one. It seems like is that pilots. It's a combination of either just blowing up the helicopter on its own, or killing the pilot and then having it sort of like spin out of control and blow up.
Yep, those are. I'd say that those two methods account pretty much for most exploding helicopters.
Yeah, I think one of the most recent interesting ones that I saw was I finally got to watching the two big Marvel movies there, the Infinity War and Endgame, and so I'm watching the credits, and they're doing sort of after the credits they do the whole like everybody's dying kind of thing, and I guess we're watching Nick Fury call Captain Marvel or something like that. But yes, that they use that technique by having the helicopter pilot be, I guess. Is it disappeared by Thanos? I don't know what they called that when he was killing everybody, but all of a sudden just kind of it was almost like an afterthought helicopter explosion. Like we just gotta the credits are done. Let's just get a helicopter explosion in here. and it was kind of off in the background.
We still got one more box to tick. Quickly,
Right, exactly.
Add another scene.
Yeah, I wonder if if these people who make these movies know about the IMDb tags, and they're just like, we need to get the exploding helicopter tag on IMDb so we can get our movie in as many places or as many lists as possible.
I tell you what, the whole business of marketing a movie is very cynical. So it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah, I always joke with my blog. I remember there's a Dolph Lundgren movie. I think it's called Army of One or The Joshua Tree. So it's got two titles. But there's famous soap opera actor here in the United States, Kristen Alfonso. She was in the movie and her character got nude. And I didn't realize until after somebody else told me that it was a body double. But I was like, boy, it was really strange. I wasn't expecting her to be nude in the movie because she's a kind of a big soap opera star. That's kind of a big deal. That ended up being my most popular Dolph post because anybody who typed in Kristen Alfonso nude found the page. So it's interesting, like the ways that people, that people come to people's sites and things like that. And I do wonder if, like, obviously with a Marvel movie with Disney's advertising budget, you wonder if, they're just like, you got to get an exploding helicopter in there some way so we can get that on the thing. But I mean, they probably didn't get all of the different ones. I think one movie I saw had an IMDb tag for policewoman shot in the face. And it's like so people get really esoteric with those tags. So maybe you get too deep into it. But that was one that I remember somebody mentioning.
That's far too down the rabbit hole, even for me.
Yes, definitely. All right. Well, why don't we get chatting about our film here, Red Scorpion, which is a 1988, I guess, political propaganda film that was the brainchild of Jack Abramoff, which I'm not sure if you know Jack Abramoff here in the United States.
I didn't. I was unaware of him until I started doing a bit of background reading on this film. So yeah, I am now aware of his very colourful and checkered life and career.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of the backdrop, I guess, of which this film which this film was made. And it was something that my friends and I didn't realize either. I think we were watching it, we were like, boy, this seems like very anti-Soviet propaganda, which, we know, especially now with some of the things that Putin has done. Of course, in England for sure, with the Russian nationals that were poisoned there in England on British soil. Like we know that, he's using old Soviet KGB techniques with a lot of the things he's doing. So it's not like they didn't deserve to be a baddie in a movie, but we kind of know where the filmmakers were coming from and the way that they made them this sort of monolithic, evil empire kind of baddie here in Red Scorpion.
Well, I mean, in fairness, Matt, probably worth mentioning that, I mean, America absolutely did not, prop up any unsavory regime at all during the 1980s.
No, not a bit. No, we were their hands were completely clean, and certainly also their record in Africa was very, very clean and spotless, and there was no propping up bad regimes there. There was no other. Yes, nothing bad happened there at all. America was all America did was send cursing, doughy reporters, anti-Soviet reporters into there to try to help out resistance movements. But in terms of the other stuff, no, we didn't really do any of that kind of thing. Not at all. No. It's funny too because it almost is a bit of a playbook too when you watch the movie. Abramoff wrote the movie, and then it was directed by Joe Zito, who did some real fantastic ones. Missing in Action. He did Invasion USA, but a lot of his movies, other than like Friday the 13th, the final chapter, a lot of his movies are sort of like these rah-rah America propagandist type movies. It just seems that they tend to be done better than this one. They're a little more exciting as well. When you think of like some of the things that the U.S. did in Vietnam, like the Agent Orange thing, and in this movie the Russians are raining some kind of like blue rain that poisons people on them. Some of the blowing up sounds and things like that, blowing up villages that they think are involved with the Viet Cong. It's almost like Abramoff went into the catalog of all the things that the U.S. did in Vietnam that were really bad, and just plastered them onto the Russians, which I guess is like kind of a classic thing to do, right? You deflect what you've done bad and you project it onto somebody else. That's sort of like a classic technique, right? We see Donald Trump, and as a president, he does that a lot. Like oh, Hillary's a criminal, not me, that kind of thing. So it was kind of interesting to watch it from that perspective.
Yeah, it's a really sort of interesting film to watch from that perspective of Cold War propaganda, because I mean, this film made obviously in the sort of last few years of the Cold War, so really this is the sort of last gasp of those kind of wave of films where you have which are able to set themselves against that type of backdrop and be really quite sort of black and white in their morality. So this is I think an interesting sort of historical artifact as much as it is as much as it is an action film.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I when I got into college and started, studying political science and sociology and whatnot, I learned that one of the things that propped up the Soviet regime in the 80s was actually Reagan's anti-Soviet rhetoric, calling the Soviet Union the evil empire and all of that stuff, which is, he was using that, he was ginning up that fear to win elections and to kind of, get his agenda across. But from the Soviet Union, the people that were kind of like, okay, we're running out of money here. The Afghan war just completely wiped us out here. Let's kind of be done with this whole thing and start trying something new. The old hard line were actually propped up by Reagan's, his thing. And of course, I don't know if you realize that in the United States, the popular myth is that Reagan ended communism, that he was the one who defeated the Soviet Union, and he was the one that took it all down. So it's kind of funny, like, while Reagan was supposed to be the one who took down Soviet communism, here's this guy Abramoff, who would have been a big Reaganite, making a movie in '88 when Reagan was out of office, saying how bad the Russians still were. So you can almost kind of go back and sort of see how the myth can be created even then.
Well, I think from my little bit of research, I saw that Abramoff was actually part of Citizens for America, which was a big pro-Reaganite. So I think I certainly think that whole it's just really interesting that here essentially is a guy, the producer of this film, Jack Abramoff, who essentially is a political lobbyist. But he's got these he's got this particular sort of anti-communist agenda, and just I guess maybe it's still possible today, just decides, what, I'm going to make a movie to espouse these views and politics, and somehow he's able to get it off the ground, get this film made, and put forward his agenda. I just he didn't. It's not like Abramoff had a big Hollywood career or anything. He essentially only made this film and Red Scorpion 2. So it's a real it's really bizarre that there was this moment in history where you could have these views and segue out of the world of political lobbying into the world of Hollywood, and make a film, and then go back to your day job in the world of think tanks and Washington DC.
Right. Well, because it shows you how lucrative a career political lobbying is. It was able to. I mean, of course, we know too that he was partially funded by the apartheid South African government that was trying to sort of get the word out there that apartheid wasn't so bad. Which, of course, at that time we all, at '88 for sure, we all kind of were like, no, apartheid is that bad. We all know how bad it is. So that was part of it too. I mean, I don't know what would be the equivalent today if he was funded. I mean, maybe by the Russian government, or another government that the Saudi government perhaps, if they were making a movie and having it actually would be perfect for the Saudi government to have like an Emmet Walshian type journalist character in a movie, that's like a kind of their kind of propaganda movie to show like, oh yeah, we don't have a problem with journalists. We don't kill them in our embassies or anything like that. So I mean, that's kind of the equivalent. I mean, and then Abramoff, of course, not I think he realized that with the movie making thing, because I don't think this movie made that much, that yes, he can get the money to make a movie, but it's not as lucrative, I guess, as being a lobbyist. And he ultimately went to jail for bilking Native American tribes here in the United States that were trying to get casinos built. Because for a long time that was the way that casinos were made in the United States, was that they weren't in Las Vegas or Atlantic City, New Jersey. They had to be on tribal lands, and so
Yeah.
That led to people like Abramoff to go in there and try to bilk a lot of communities out of money. And so, yeah, he went to jail for that. And now he's a lobbyist again because in America, it's a land of opportunity, land of forgiveness. And so, yeah, you could do something like that and then just show right back up.
Yeah, that was one of the more surprising details. You'd think what he did would end most careers, but yeah, apparently you can just sign a declaration. Yeah, I did this stuff. Yeah, went to jail and go right back to doing the day job. But I mean, just sort of pulling it back to the film a little bit more. I mean, obviously we've got this Cold War backdrop to this film, and but I think one thing about Red Scorpion, which is really interesting as a film, is actually the African setting that we've already sort of spoken about, because most Cold War thrillers, most Cold War action films, I mean, typically have a European or Eastern European backdrop. You do get some where sort of South American backdrop, but there's very few that actually have Africa as that particular backdrop, and it's not because it wasn't an arena in which the Cold War played out. It absolutely was, but for one reason or another, there aren't terribly many films which use that as a setting, and I think that really makes Red Scorpion stand out a little bit above many of the action films which sort of came out of this particular sort of period and came out of this particular time in political history.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, we've kind of found out that part of that reason was that he was being funded by South Africa at that time, and that was part of why they set it there. I think they were able to do that more affordably. But yeah, I agree with you there that, like, especially Latin America seems to be the best place to play out that kind of interplay between Soviet interests and American interests, because that's literally it happens so much there. I think for American audiences, doing it in Asia brings back images of Vietnam. But excuse me, I think the funny thing is, by doing it in Africa, it did show, I think, just a kind of also a lack of awareness of America's history there, and so making it seem like the Russians are the exploitative ones and America is the benevolent saviors. And to be honest, actually the Russians use our history in Africa as a way to gain inroads when they're trying to gain influence in emerging African nations. China does the same thing. They're like, we're not America. We didn't do all these things to you. And also Europe, they also use that against European nations as well. But so it is. I think that might be part of the reason why they don't set those movies here. But because of the history. But yeah, I agree with you there that it made for a unique setup where you had it definitely made it unique, especially for an 80s movie compared to where the rest of them are set.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of other sort of aspects which, because I had watched this film before, but I mean, it was a long time ago that I'd last seen it, and so on this rewatch, it felt in many ways as if I was sort of rediscover, coming to this film new. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting about this film was the fact that actually the hero of the film starts out as the villain, and I thought that made for a really interesting arc for Dolph Lundgren's character. So in this film, he's a Spetsnaz soldier who is given a mission to basically infiltrate this the kind of the rebel group within this African country, to get close to its leader and then murder him, because they think that will basically undermine the rebel activities. And so that's sort of Dolph's mission that he starts off in this film, but obviously that doesn't go according to plan, and during the course of the film he has this conversion and comes to see that actually the Soviets are not trying to free this country from oppression. They actually are the oppressors themselves. And so Dolph's character has this particular journey where he starts as the villain and then becomes the hero later on in the film. And I thought that was much more interesting than many of these other films. Say for instance Rambo 3, which I think you can make a lot of parallels between Red Scorpion and Rambo 3, where Stallone's the hero at the start of that film and he's the hero at the end of that particular film. And I think that the arc that Dolph has here is another thing which makes Red Scorpion stand out and a more interesting film than might appear if you're just looking at the sort of the cover art and just watching the trailer on YouTube.
Yeah, I think there was a message in there that it's not, that I guess maybe it was this idea that not all Soviets are bad, and that if we could just show them, and I guess it wasn't so much showing them freedom in this case; it was really showing them the human side of the local people. And of course, being stuck with needles in a torture scene also didn't, that didn't help his loyalty to his the Soviet Union at that time. But I think there was a sense that if you just sort of spread American freedom and what's great about America, everybody will come on board eventually if they're just exposed to it, or if the right people are exposed to it. And I think you're right that by having that in the movie, it made for an interesting dynamic where you wouldn't have that in a movie with like Rambo or something like that, where he's already American, he's already the freedom loving guy, and so we don't need to convert him at all. He just needs to get out there and blow things up with explosive tipped arrows. Whereas there had to be some, and it's interesting too, because when you're watching Dolph when he's infiltrating the baddies, there's a sense you know he's infiltrating them, but the way it played out, he's killing his own people while he's supposed to be this infiltrating guy, and so you kind of wonder how much is he really, does he really feel this? How much is, if he's killing his own people to continue this ruse? How it was an interesting thing, and I almost felt like he was going to turn even before that, but then of course he doesn't. He tries to go and kill the leader. But yeah, and then I guess maybe that's why the interesting thing is that we had Soviets and we had Cubans there.
Yes, and I think I think the filmmakers must have been aware of that problem which you're describing there about with Dolph having to kill people from his own side. So in the film he kills in the film the Russians are fighting alongside Cubans, and I think also some Czechs as well. I think that's certainly referenced, and the soldiers that he kills are not, during the first part of the film I'm pretty sure just Cubans or Czechs. He's not actually killing any Russians. And I think that was the film's way of trying to navigate that difficulty. But I agree that was a little bit of a weakness. But we're not watching a film here for gritty verisimilitude, so I kind of gave it a pass on that, really.
Well, that and now that you mentioned it, from Abramov's standpoint, that actually is a good point for him to make. That doesn't matter who you are with Russia. You could be Cuba, you could be Eastern Bloc country, you could be North Korea. It doesn't matter who you are with Russia or Soviet Union. They only care about themselves, and they will kill anybody to get their own aims. They'll for them, Cuba, it doesn't matter if you're Cuban, whatever. That kind of message, which again, America didn't do anything like that when they were like during the Cold War. It was just the Soviet Union that did those kinds of things. So absolutely. Now, what were your thoughts? How did you feel about this as an action film overall? Did you feel like this one worked, or was long, or anything like that?
Well, I thought this film actually worked, and I think on this rewatch, I have to say that Red Scorpion has gone up in my appreciation a bit more. I think it's got some really solid action sequences. There's some great the escape from the prison at the beginning of the film. I think that's really well done. That's really well staged. And there's some decent action along the way. There's a sort of a raid by Soviet forces on a rebel village, which comes along because it's been about 15 minutes since we last had an action scene, so that was strategically placed in the film just to sort of pep up everyone's interest. And then obviously the end of the film is I think that's where things really kick up a gear. And I really enjoyed the sequences there. There's some really great stuff as part of that sequence. So we get to see Dolph flexing his muscles, lifting up this vehicle, which has got a kind of crucial anti-tank gun on, so that he can get that back on the road, so that it can blow up this tank. And then, as was seen to be the case for a sort of particular period in the 80s, there's a special machine gun that our hero gets to use, and sure enough, Dolph gets to use that at the climax of this particular movie. So yeah, I thought the action here was very good. I don't think it's not one I would hold up as like the best example of 80s action, but I certainly think what you get here is really very good quality, and there's certainly enough action here I think to sort of satisfy most action fans.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I had this up. I recently did that list of my favorite Dolph movies on Letterboxd, and this one came in at 48 of the, I guess I don't know how many I've seen, like 70 or something like that, but it came in at 48, so it was like I had it as like the best of the ones I didn't like. And I think I don't know if I'm going to move it up necessarily, but I agree with you there. I mean, I think Joseph Zito as an action director, he was one of the best in the 80s at that time. He just didn't do as many as kind of like, Mark L. Lester and, some of the other big heavy hitters at that time, Sidney J. Fury. Is it I don't know if it's, I don't know if maybe I shouldn't give him a middle initial if I don't remember exactly what it is.
It is Sidney J. Fury.
It is J. Okay, perfect. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think Joseph Zito, he had some big ones at that time, for canon films in particular. So I think you're right. I think he makes for what it really wasn't as big as some of those other ones. He definitely makes the action stand out like that. One of the things that really hurt the movie for me was Emmet Walsh's character. I mean, it was he just annoyed me a lot. Like you talked about with that escape scene. That escape scene was so fantastic, but then it's like I've got him there, and I mean I love Little Richard. I'm a huge Little Richard fan, so the music was great. But it's like just like I there were a few times where I just like wanted him out of there. I mean, I almost feel like Dolph's character felt the same way about Emmet Walsh's character, because there's that scene where they're in the prison, right? And he knows he's got to make his escape with them so he can win over this second in command to the rebel leader. And he sits there and watches Emmet Walsh's character get burned with a cigar by Brion James, and he knows he's got to make his move, and that would have been the perfect time to make his move. Nobody's paying attention. They're all watching Brion James do that, but you almost feel like he wanted to make sure that happened. So that was something that I think that one, and I think for my friends and I, we had trouble with that. I mean, there's one scene in the movie where they're all back at the village and they're all having a fun time, and Emmet Walsh is doing something with a donkey in the background, and I just felt like that was perfect. That there's the two jackasses kind of there together. It was almost like almost like that. I don't know that I necessarily took it personally as an American that the only American in the film was being portrayed that way by Emmet Walsh, but it was kind of joke. It was a very Emmet Walshian character, and I think when you think of tropes, the sort of annoying sidekick kind of character like that is one that, I mean, there's a scene where Dolph had a gun trained on him, and I was like, come on, Dolph, just take us out of our misery. When I knew he wasn't going to, I knew there's plenty more Emmet Walsh to come. So that I think diminished it a bit for me. But yeah, I agree with you. I think like the gun thing you talked about. It's like, how many movies have we seen where they show the gun at the beginning of the movie, and we know that at some point, and of course, like he finds it. What is it? It's like on a display case or something like that.
Yeah.
When he finds it. Yeah. And of course that great scene where does he use that gun, or is it that's the gun he uses, right, to blow off the guy's hand who's holding the grenade?
It is, yes.
Yeah, which was a fantastic scene. So I mean, you definitely get really great Joseph Zito kind of action in this, and I definitely appreciated that. I may move it up on the list a bit, on the second viewing. I think what ended up standing out to me when I thought about this movie was Emmet Walsh. I think he kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, and seeing it again, I think, and of course having so many like 2000s and 2010s action movies to compare it to now, it's like, oh wow, I look at that and it's like, this is actually really well done. It's really, the action is a lot of practical effects as opposed to CGI and that kind of thing. Of course, they wouldn't have had back then anyway. But I think I have a better appreciation for it now than I did then.
Well, I mean, I'm very taken by your strong feelings for Emmet Walsh. I mean, Matt, wow. I mean, can't wait for Dolph to put you and Emmet Walsh out of your collective misery. But I'm gonna have to make a bit of a defense here for Emmet Walsh, because I actually really enjoyed him in this film, because I do agree he's giving a very typically Emmet Walsh performance,
right.
That's almost a movie trope in itself, just a Emmet Walsh cameo. And so he plays this garrulous, foul-mouthed journalist who's a bit of a schlub, but he kind of brings an energy which really I felt sort of peps up some of these scenes. So you talk about that sort of, for at the beginning section of the film, you've got this sort of trio that have sort of fallen together of Emmet Walsh, Dolph, and the kind of second in command, Kalunda, the second in command of the rebel forces. They kind of form a little informal trio at the start of this movie. And so, Dolph is this sort of glowering, not saying very much sort of Spetsnaz soldier. Kalunda is the sort of rebel leader, and I think he starts the film. He's not. He's quite a sort of reserved, contained character. So if you just had those two on their own, it could be a bit of a damp squib. And so I think that Emmet Walsh kind of acts as a he helps pep up that particular sort of triangle of relationships with his slightly sort of manic, over the top energy, and whacking on the whenever he gets a bit quiet in the cab of the truck that they've stolen, he's obviously whacking on the Little Richard just to kind of cover over the silences.
Yeah, well, I like that. I like the Little Richard. I think he's almost. I know this movie isn't really Quixotic, or it's not really a Don Quixote kind of thing, but he's almost kind of like our Sancho Panza in that sense, right? That he's providing the comic relief to the stuff that we're not it's like I can definitely understand. I think I would have maybe liked to maybe a different kind of character who did that kind of thing, maybe, but I definitely see what you mean there. That he made that. And I guess for me, I think that also kind of made those scenes a little bit more draggy, because it was just Emmet Walsh, talking about oh, we swear because we're in America, we've got freedom of speech here, which anybody who lives in America knows that it's not entirely, it's probably more so than Russia, but it's not always perfect. If I started swearing in a store, people would look at me funny, like, what are you doing? Why are you talking like that in here? Maybe not in South Philadelphia, actually. People here it's more like the opposite, where I'm like, oh man, that person's swearing, they must be really angry. And it's like, nope, they're just having a friendly conversation with a cashier. So it's a little different.
What did you make of Brion James in this film? Because I know, from being a long-time reader of your blog, he's somebody who crops up in many of the films that you review. I mean, what did you make of what we got of him here?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of him. I do think
that was the shame, really, wasn't it?
I mean, that's kind of common with him, is that you don't see him a lot, which is unfortunate. But for the Brion James, I mean, I like the bad Russian accent. He definitely went full for that. It was I would have liked to have seen a little bit more like him versus Dolph kind of thing, or something
definitely.
like that. I think that was one of the problems with this, was that you didn't, he did have one confrontation with the Cuban leader, who I believe was in Red Dawn, I think, as well, right? Mm-hmm. I think he played the leader in Red Dawn. I mean, this movie has a lot of similarities to Red Dawn in the propaganda aspect of it, the anti-Soviet propaganda part. But I think my favorite part, of course, was that he, when he gives it to Emmet Walsh, and I don't wish cigar burning on anybody. But it was kind of like the perfect kind for me, where it was all done off screen. I don't need to see it, but I could be like, yeah, and of course it had no effect on Emmet Walsh at all. I mean, he's like running around. There's no blood coming through his shirt after. He's just jumping into a water, in a river later. So I don't think it really affected Emmet Walsh that much either. I think it was just sort of like, you wonder how much it really even did it. I mean, I wonder if he even like burned him with the cigar, or if maybe he just kind of like pulled at some of his chest hairs or something. We just didn't know what happened there. But yeah, I think Brion James, I think he was in this as a name. It's kind of funny because it's and Brion James. I don't know if his agent wanted to be the last one, make sure he was last listed on here. But it's funny that they made sure he was the last listed. But yeah, I think I would have liked to have seen more of him. I mean, when I think of some of his great ones, I think it was Virtual Assassin, where he or Cyberjack with Michael Dudikoff, where he plays a villain who back when we didn't know what computer viruses were, so we thought they were real viruses, and he gets infected with a computer virus, and his hair is all green and everything. But that is sort of like the standard of the best Brion James. This was really far from that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree with you. We don't get a lot of him in this particular film, and yeah, as you say, it would have been brilliant if he and Dolph could have had a confrontation in here. His accent is completely. I've literally no idea what he was attempting to do. I'm assuming he was going for Russian, but it sounds more South African than anything else. Very bizarre. But I think not enough Brion James.
No. Now, what did you think of the exploding helicopter in this movie? What were your thoughts of how it played out, and sort of as in terms of exploding helicopters, as a whole?
Well, I really enjoyed the exploding helicopter in this film. It takes place at the end of the film. It's part of the movie's climax, and that's generally where I prefer to see my exploding helicopters. I mean, I'll take them everywhere and anywhere, but if you're going to give me a choice, I like to see it as an integral part of the film's climax here. And there are some details here that I thought were really quite cool if you've watched a lot of exploding helicopters like myself. So we see Dolph, this helicopter's just about to make its getaway. It's just taking off. Dolph fires his special machine gun at the helicopter, which brings it back down towards the ground, and then he opens fire on the cockpit of the helicopter and blows out the entire cockpit. So the rest of the sort of helicopter is still at that point still intact, but the whole sort of front, all the windows, all of the sort of the seat area has been completely blown out, which was something I've not seen before. I thought that was really cool. And then we get a little bit of backwards and forwards between Dolph and the main Russian villain before Dolph then finally gives it another once over with his machine gun and then blows it up. But nice practical effect fireball that we see. I was thoroughly satisfied by the exploding helicopter action we got in this film.
Yeah, and I like that technique. I think another Dolph movie, Skin Trade, used a similar technique, but not as great of an initial explosion, where the helicopter is disabled, and then you have the confrontation with the baddie, and then you officially blow it up. And I liked it here that it was like you said, it was a really nice explosion. And I kind of thought that was in a way, though, when I first saw that first explosion, I was like, oh, is that it? Is that all I'm getting? It's just the front of the helicopter being blown up. I want to see the whole thing go up, But luckily they were kind of like, it was one of those things where they're like, hold your horses, just stick with us here for a little bit. And then, like you said, we got that final confrontation. Then he just. One thing I always love too, when you think of another movie trope, it's almost like they combined a couple here, was the trope of the good guy turning his back on the baddie lifting his gun to shoot him, and the hero knowing that he's going to do that and turning around and getting that final justice. And I think you couldn't have had it better. I think this was definitely for Joseph Zito, a guy who does, did really great action in the 80s. I think he made it. He definitely did what we wanted him to do. This was, if I wanted Joseph Zito to do a helicopter explosion, I like you said, I wasn't disappointed with this. This was definitely a good one.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that little moment that you talk about where, the baddie sort of, the hero turns his back and then the baddie sort of decides to lift the gun. I think that's just, it's a nice little, I guess it adds a moment of sort of tension in the sense of it gives the villain like, okay, they're making an active choice now to like they've got a chance to walk away from this situation. They've got an opportunity to reflect on the Soviet Union's occupation and practices in a in a developing African country. He's got that opportunity to reflect on what he's done with his life, but he decides, no, I'm going to shoot Dolph Lundgren in the back, which is generally not a wise thing to try and do.
No, and I think that might be one reason why helicopters blow up in movies more than airplanes, because helicopters, it's like the baddie. I mean, yes, the pilot is not necessarily active at the way that the henchman shooting out of the helicopter or something like that would be. But I guess maybe you make that point that if you're a baddie helicopter driver, you're just as complicit in all of this. But if it's like a plane of bad guys that gets blown up, well, everybody who's just kind of sitting in their seats, listening to music or reading a book or whatever, they're not, they're kind of innocent in that point, right? Where it's like, like if Dolph
reading the in-flight magazine,
exactly, watching a movie or something, they're innocent, like they're helpless, they're defenseless, and heroes killing defenseless people, that's what the baddies are supposed to do. And I think you're right that and I think maybe that's something that's gone away a little bit too. Now heroes do just kind of kill baddies in cold blood. But like you said, like the movie wants it to be like this guy. Dolph is not completely evil. He's only going to kill somebody who's trying to kill him. Yeah. And so this guy is incapacitated. He's talked to him. He's said what he said his piece. Like you said, giving the guy a chance to reflect on what's happening. And his choice was to try to pull a gun on Dolph. And you get what you deserve there, and and of course we get what we want, right? We get the payoff that we were looking for without having to feel guilty about it, that Dolph was killing this baddie in cold blood, which I don't know how much we would have felt that. I mean, this guy did enough bad things that if he had, but I guess there's that idea that no matter what bad things that guy does, it's not good for the hero to kill him in cold blood.
Definitely not.
Now, one other thing I noticed about this, and I don't know if you caught this as well when you're watching the movie, I marked down at least 4 different times when this helicopter appears in the movie, and not even like doing anything, but like just sort of flies, and they make a point of showing us. I think I had like the 37-minute, 59-minute, hour 15. It definitely was a lot of foreshadowing that, if this explosion wasn't good, I think it would have been a huge disappointment that, they built this up a little bit. Did you see that as well? And is this something that you've seen before where they build up the future helicopter explosion?
I enjoyed how these Mill Hind 24 helicopter, which is the one we see in this movie, it's as you said, it's repeatedly built up in this film as sort of the Russians' main weapon of oppression, and we see it appearing ominously at different points in the movie. There's a great moment where there are some I think Russian soldiers up on a ridge line, and then the helicopter just sort of comes up from behind the ridge line at a particular moment to just show how dominant the sort of Russian soldiers position is at that particular moment. So I really enjoyed how the sort of the helicopter was kind of foreshadowed in this movie, and then obviously we get the payoff at the end. But you do get we sort of call it over exploding helicopter. We call it sort of Chekhov's chopper, where the helicopter explosion is foreshadowed earlier in the film. And I think my favorite example of Chekhov's chopper is in the Da Vinci Code sequel, Angels and Demons, with Tom Hanks, where you've got Ewan McGregor as a kind of temporary pope, and for absolutely no reason, so he's there and he's kind of, classic, I don't know what they call the robes, he's dressed up like a you'd expect a priest in the Vatican to be dressed up, and for no earthly reason whatsoever, he sort of announces, oh yes, I used to be a pilot in the British Army flying helicopters. Which obviously comes oddly comes back to play a very important plot point at the end of the movie. So I think that's the most egregious example, I think, of foreshadowing I've seen in a exploding helicopter film so far to date.
Oh, that is amazing. I always love that kind of plot convenience theater type thing, right? Where it's like, oh, by the way, I can do this. You need somebody who can do this. Oh, by the way, I just happen to be able to. I think my favorite is whenever in a movie when there's a woman whose dad was in the army, suddenly they're a master of weaponry, and they can, oh, how did you learn to use that weapon? Well, my dad was a general in the army. It's like, what is that? I mean, but yeah, it's always that kind of thing where it's like, yeah, it's just sort of, oh, by the way, I can do this. It's like a plot convenience theater. Kind of like the same was like, the character's trying to escape something, and oh, there just happens to be a rope there for them to climb up. It's like, somebody just happens to be a master of something that they need them to be a master of, and yeah, that's always kind of funny, that sort of by the way approach to it.
And I think, going back to what we were talking about at the top of this show, which is, you could be irritated by that type of plotting, right. But I can't help but be amused by it. And I think, for me, it's part of the charm of these movies is the occasional plot contrivance like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's part of what makes these action movies fun is that, you need people shooting, you need people blowing things up, and they just happen to do it. And however you can get things blown up, that's fine with us. We'll take it. And like you said, it's more fun sometimes when it's done in a ridiculous way like that. Perfect. Well, Will, I think we're about to wrap up here. Did you want to let everybody know sort of where they can find you on social media and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. So if you're interested in checking out our blog, where we've got loads of reviews of films with exploding helicopters in, got ton of information on there about how, where, why helicopters explode in movies. So go to explodinghelicopter.com. You can find us on Twitter. I'm very active there. So come and say hello. I'm at Chopper Fireball on Twitter. And then we're on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, Letterboxd. We're in loads of different places. So if you just search for Exploding Helicopter, you will find us.
Yeah.
And don't forget to check out the podcast as well.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say the podcast is fantastic. Especially, I think that the first one to check out is that Rambo 3 one. That was my favorite one of yours. But I mean, they're all really great. I love the one you did on T-Force. That was, for our PM Entertainment fans out there, was a great one. Actually, another good bookend for this one would be Amerigeddon. That was
oh yeah.
And of course, I was on the one with Codename Wild Geese, which also I think was another great helicopter explosion. A little bit different than this one here, for sure. It was a little bit, but also a helicopter that was part of the plot, which I think is always interesting in these movies.
Always good to see helicopters, play a prominent role in any film.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, again, you can find us the blog dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. We're on, as you know, Twitter, Facebook, Letterboxd, the whole 9 yards. Come check us out, and we're happy to help out. Well, thank you again, Will, for being on. It was a great time, and we'll have to do this again sometime for sure.
Absolute pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having you on.
All right. Thank you very much. And everybody, have a great one.
Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.